On 20 October, United Nations troops have seemingly sent the bulk of the communist forces fleeing in defeat toward the Manchurian border, 100 miles to the north. From west to east, U.S., British, and South Korean troops are pursuing the disintegrating communist forces. By 27 October, South Korean troops have reached the Manchurian border on the Yellow River near Chosan, and other UN forces have advanced against virtually no opposition. But on the same day, a sudden, unforeseen factor changes the entire course of the war. Chinese communist troops cross the Manchurian border and help the North Korean Reds drive back UN forces. Chinese communists fighting in Korea are estimated at 75,000, with another 500,000 across the border in Manchuria posing a more serious threat. By 8 November, UN forces have been driven back considerably. But on this date, another unforeseen event occurs. Chinese and North Korean communist troops suddenly break off contact with United Nations forces and fight only rear guard delaying actions as once again UN troops drive toward the Manchurian border. On 20 November, another United Nations unit reaches the Manchurian border. This time it is a United States unit, the first U.S. outfit to reach the border. As United Nations troops continue to advance in other areas, much depends on what the huge Chinese army will do next. The first sign of the growing threat from China. Captured in East Coast battles 50 miles from the Manchurian border, these troops belong to Chinese Red Army divisions in the combat zone. Chinese and North Korean captives are brought out of the hills to Wonsan and Hamhung. The Chinese are better clothed than their North Korean comrades. With their quilted uniforms, they wear tennis shoes wrapped in layers of burlap, making a kind of shoe pack. In contrast with the Chinese, the North Koreans are in rags at this stage of the war. The prisoners double time across the Wonsan airfield. They are being marched to landing craft, which will take them to Busan. Since the beginning of the war, the North Koreans have suffered 460,000 casualties, including the dead, wounded, and captured. 130,000 Red prisoners have been taken at this time. 2 women are in this group. Prisoners of the UN are treated in strict compliance with international law. Over 25,000 men have been wounded in Korea, but less than 2% of these men have died. Less than 2 men out of every 100 wounded. The main reason for this low death rate is the speed of treatment. This is a battalion aid station, first stop in a wounded man's swift journey through the echelons of medical aid. The average time spent at a battalion aid station is only 72 minutes. Many types of transportation are used in evacuation to the next echelon, the regimental collecting station. Specially equipped jeeps are used in rough terrain near the front, but if the roads are serviceable, ambulances may be used. Air evacuation is fastest of all and enables certain medical channels to be skipped. Behind the collecting stations are division clearing stations and mobile hospitals. Medical care takes manpower. It takes several men to carry a litter. Evacuation procedures are similar throughout the services. The Navy provides medical service for the Marines. The results of speed have been shown by a hospital at Busan. Out of 18,000 wounded brought in during the first 3 months of the war, only 40 men died. Field expedient. Wooden stands instead of tables speed the movement of litters and allow the aid men to work at hand level without bending over. There is nothing fancy about these hospitals. They are there to save lives. The death rate of wounded in World War I was 8%. In World War II, it was 4.5%. Korea's approximate 2% death rate is a milestone in military medicine. Many casualties are evacuated by air to Japan. In a parachute drop, such as the 4,000-man jump north of Pyongyang in October, the parachutists' own medics jump with them. They carry enough medical supplies to last until contact is made with friendly forces. But even before contact is made, the injured may be evacuated from the drop zone by air. Helicopters with specially constructed containers carry the wounded out. Many a man who could not have survived a jeep or ambulance ride over the rough roads of Korea owes his life to these evacuation planes. Japan is the next stop from the hospitals in Korea. Japan is only an hour and a half away from Korea by plane, but less than half of the incoming wounded remain here. The rest are moved on to the United States. Many men wounded at the front lines in Korea have found themselves back in the United States 3 days later. At Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, members of the American Ordnance Association meet for an annual exhibition put on by the U.S. Army Ordnance Department. They see both U.S. and foreign equipment. A Russian 122mm gun. A Russian 85mm anti-aircraft gun. A Russian 152mm howitzer. U.S. and foreign vehicles are also shown. A Russian T-34 tank turret from Korea. A U.S. M-26 tank, waterproofed and equipped with a snorkel breathing device for use in fording operations and landing. A new waterproof Jeep. Greater electrical capacity for radio equipment has been added to this Jeep. A new 6x6 2.5-ton truck is equipped with a snorkel breather and waterproofing. Next, the visitors watch demonstration firing. Recoilless rifles give the infantry artillery firepower. Comparison firing, 50 caliber machine gun. An aircraft machine gun. Other guns are demonstrated in separate and comparison firing. On 15 November, in the Sea of Japan off the coast of North Korea, Navy Task Force 77 was operating in support of ground action in the drive toward the Yellow River. Winter weather is closing in. Naval operations are hampered by high seas and extreme cold. The aircraft carrier Philippine Sea receives ammunition, mail, and other supplies hauled across open water in a cargo net. Such operations are difficult in rough weather. The first load is ammunition. It is quickly taken in and passed back into the carrier's magazine. At this time, Navy and Marine carrier planes were taking the fight into every corner of North Korea below the Manchurian border. Carriers were also in operation on the west coast of Korea. On both coasts, the Navy's task of mine sweeping was continuing. During the resupply operations, the Philippine Sea is hit by a snowstorm. Despite the weather, a tanker comes alongside and refueling gets underway. As refueling and the transfer of supplies continue, the seas get higher and higher, and the storm becomes a veritable blizzard. This is not an unusually heavy storm. It is typical winter weather in the northern Sea of Japan. The crew breaks out snow shovels on the carrier. Although air operations are halted during the height of the storm, flights from snow and ice-covered decks are becoming routine. The planes are covered to protect them from the storm. Combat maintenance of the Corsairs and Panther jets continues through the storm. The Navy reports the typical Korean temperatures in the northern area average 11 degrees above zero during November and 5 degrees below zero during December. A more familiar kind of winter combat starts on the carrier deck. This is a severe test for carrier planes. During World War II, most carriers were in the milder climate of the South Pacific. At Hagerstown, Maryland, the U.S. Air Force demonstrates its latest cargo plane. This is the Fairchild XC-120, a packed carrier plane with a detachable fuselage. Doors are designed like clamshells. Cargo capacity is 20,000 pounds. It carries 64 combat-equipped troops or 36 litter patients with 4 attendants. The pack has detachable wheels. 4 electric drum hoists raise and lower the pack from the carrier. A central control operates the release and locking mechanism, and the pack lowers to its own wheels. Then the hoist lines are detached. The 5-man crew of the carrier consists of pilot, co-pilot, radio operator, navigator, and engineer. When the pack is separated from the carrier, it is easily towed away. This pack can be used to house various types of shops, headquarters units, emergency hospitals, weather stations. It can also be converted into a tanker for carrying fuel. Wall socket connections lock the pack to the carrier. A rubber tubing seals pack to carrier by compressed air. On the carrier, the 4 ball socket locks operate simultaneously. The carrier is powered by 2 Pratt & Whitney engines with reversible pitch propellers. Maximum speed is 250 miles per hour. The ceiling is 25,000 feet. landing gear consists of 4 retractable dual wheel units. It's electrically operated, and the main or rear wheels have brakes. This airplane opens a new field for aviation. The cargo pack is to aircraft what the trailer is to highway trucks. In Washington, the Department of Defense displays the winter uniforms which have been issued to United States troops in Korea, and what the Chinese communists are wearing in North Korea's sub-zero temperatures. A captured quilted uniform is compared with the U.S. winter uniform. Unlike the Chinese, the U.S. cold weather uniforms are designed on the principle that the best protection against cold is several layers of clothing. In North Korea, U.S. troops are fighting in one of the coldest battle areas in U.S. history. Army and Marine winter uniforms are compared. The uniform for both services is the same, with one exception. The Army wears a pile-lined jacket for ordinary cold, while the Marines wear a battle jacket inside a field jacket. Wet and dry cold weather equipment, which has been sent to U.S. troops in North Korea, is the end result of much practical experimentation, such as the exercise Sweetbriar cold weather maneuvers held in Alaska in February 1950. With icy winds blowing down from Manchuria, bringing snow and sleet storms, our troops are fighting in almost Arctic conditions. 2 types of cold weather boots have been designed: rubber shoe packs for wet cold, felt line for dry cold. Importance of winter clothing in North Korea was emphasized when some units outdistanced their supply lines, went without full cold weather equipment for a few days. Basic and innermost layer of the U.S. cold weather uniform is long woolen underwear. Over these are worn 2 pairs of trousers, a flannel shirt, a high-necked sweater, a jacket, and in extreme cold, a pile-lined parka. There are 2 types of mittens. The regular mittens have a trigger finger. Mittens worn with the dry cold uniform have no trigger finger, but they have cheek warmers. Following the separate layer principle, 3 pairs of socks are worn, each pair being successively larger, with the boots large enough to take 3 pair comfortably. Experimentation in refrigerated laboratories, as well as in the Arctic itself, has given U.S. troops newer and better ways of fighting the weather. In this parka, with fur-rimmed hood, the U.S. fighting man is equipped to endure the coldest weather.